or?
Yeah, I just clicked on the record. I've actually I've had probably at least half a dozen associates email me and said, they wish they could be on, they can't, but wanted us to record because they certainly want to hear what we have to say, what you have to say. So, for those that jumped on, thank you. I know that there'll probably be some more that will jump on as we go through this, but it is recorded, and so, or excuse me, is recording right now. So we will we'll share that with everybody so they can view it at a later time. But
so Michael or Melvin, when are you supposed to have the surgery now?
January 22nd.
Okay. Will that hinder spring golf?
No, because it's only about a 6-week period.
Okay. Okay, good. All right. Well, if we want to get started.
Yeah, we'll get started. First, I just want to check in. Hey, Bailey, did you go through level 1 or going through level 1 testing right now?
I did a seminar last week.
Okay, how'd that go?
It was kind of boring.
Yeah.
It was really,
Talk might be boring too, Bailey. All right, but go on.
I wish I could go to Florida because I feel like I'd be more, like, I don't know. I can't think of the word I'm trying to say right now. Involved.
You would get more out of it or more involved if you were around other people in a classroom type of setting versus just doing it
because it was just a big Google Meets thing and you could chat. So no one really, everyone just chatted on their computer and typed and no one really kind of spoke. But there wasn't really time to because there was 80-some people. So it would have taken forever. But yeah, I definitely would have gotten more out of it. And it was easy for me to be like, oh, I have something else to do if I was getting bored. And step away for a little bit when I probably shouldn't have. But I mean, I got a lot out of it. It was just, it got kind of boring.
Yeah. Now, when are your plans to go through all that and then get registered to take your test?
Yeah, so I need to finish my portfolio. I mean, I have a lot of downtime right now, so I'm going to try to get through my portfolio stuff, but it depends when this baby comes. I'm due in January, so that's going to kind of stop everything.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely. It'll probably be the spring before I test.
Okay.
But I'm going to talk to the guys down at Blue Top and try to do the lesson stuff down there, see if they can give me a lesson and watch a couple lessons. Just try to knock that out in the wintertime. But got a plan. Let's see if I stick to it.
Well, understand. Hey, congratulations to Jazz. Jazz just went through his qualifying test, so he passed that. So he's now going to get entered into level 1s. So congratulations on that, Jazz. I think you just did that, last week or last Friday, I think.
Yeah, it was last Friday. Actually just submitted my application yesterday, so just waiting for that.
Good job, bud. Congratulations. Well, for those that are on, certainly appreciate you joining. And once again, this is recorded, so we'll send this out to everybody too. But certainly appreciate Kevin Dorrington kind of stepping up to the plate and offering his wisdom. And, kind of leading up to this, it's, build your careers upon advice of mentors. And I can't think of a better mentor than Kevin Dorrington, who's had 35 plus years as a PGA professional. He's had many roles from obviously director of golf, head golf professional, to director of sales at Yamaha Golf Cars, to the golf equipment side with Wilson. So he's been there, done that, seen it all. And so, we were kind of talking to Kevin before this meeting right here as to what would he want to talk about, what advice would he give. And we kind of landed on, and we've been on this road of kind of interviewing resumes. And Jason Boaz talked last meeting about that. So we kind of wanted to keep that momentum. And so the purpose of this call is, Mike Arms and I are going to ask Kevin some questions, and Kevin's going to talk about what he's seen what advice he would give. You know, I can only imagine, Kevin, the amount of interviews you've held, and what you've seen, what was great, what wasn't great, and the advice. So once again, certainly appreciate you taking the time to
Sure.
talk to our associates and spreading your wisdom, if you would. So with that, let's lead into, a question I have. What are some of your basics of interviewing? Whether it's arrival dress, body language, what's kind of rule number one?
Let me back up, Michael, real quick, and I know some of you might have been on the talk that Jason Bowles, career consultant, gave to you maybe a few months back, but I want to just throw a couple quick things at you about the resume cover letter, just my own personal thoughts, if that would be okay.
Absolutely.
To begin with, make sure you use that IPGA.com site for putting together the resume and the cover letter, and there's certainly a number of sites on the internet that you can go to that would learn and to write your resume the correct way in your cover letter. But one thing that I've done on very important jobs is I have paid somebody to do my resume and my cover letter. And one of the reasons I've done that a couple of times is I wanted it really specific to the job and the job details that they were listing. So expensive, yeah, $300 to $600 possibly to have it done professionally. But if you have a real important job that you're going after, you might want to give it some thought, because they can really take the job bulletin and the job description and write the resume and the cover letter specifically to that job. And so something to think about, because, as you heard Jason say, you really try to make sure your resume and cover letter are professionally written based on that job, and it changes on every job. So something to think about. But the interviewing basics that you asked about, Michael, arrive early. Let's face it, they're not looking for somebody. They're on a tight schedule to come in late, so make sure you do that. I suggest you overdress versus the underdress side of it. You're better to be in that situation than walk in and they're all in coat and ties and dresses and you're not. So, overdress if you need to. My suggestion would be to try to write down the names of those that are interviewing you on your pad in the order of how they're sitting so that you can address them by their name. Probably most of them you've never met before. So I think it's very important that you try to address them by name by jogging it down on your notepad. Besides that, I think if they don't know you very well, and this is a real key here, and they've done any type of interviewing, they're going to circle back and ask you questions throughout the interview back to your job experience and your education. Why? Many people unfortunately lie about their job, what their job experience and about their education. So if they don't know you very well, I'm telling you right now, they're going to circle back. And throughout the interview, they're going to circle back and they're going to just continue to hit upon those two areas to see if you're telling the truth or not. So important for you to know that. I had to take a lot of classes at Wilson. We interviewed a lot of people for sales reps, plus there was other regional managers besides myself, and we had to sit in with their interviews. So we had a lot of seminars at Wilson based on how to interview people. I want to share a couple of those secrets, with you going forward. But one of them that I consider under the interview basics is the fact that there are certain signs that you need to be aware of that show you're not telling the truth. So first of all, tell the truth. But the things that they'll look for are true signs that you're not being truthful. One of them happens to be putting your hands in the prayer position. My camera's not working right now. I wish it was, but that looks like you're praying. True sign you're not telling the truth. A couple of others, if you happen to stand up in the middle of the interview, real sign, even if you're just adjusting something on your clothing, that you're not telling the truth. Biting of your lip. You can't look them in the eye when you're answering. These are all signs to them. Touching your mouth. And one real big one is if you're right-handed and you're answering the questions by looking left, or if you're left-handed and you're answering them by looking right. I don't want anybody telling the truth, but I'm telling you, what am I telling this to you for? Because they can tell. I guarantee you I can tell if you're not telling me the truth in an interview. So avoid it. You'll get caught if they're any good at what they do. One of the ladies that taught our seminars at Wilson worked for the last 4 presidents. She had 2 jobs. The first job she had was in the area of interviewing anybody that was going to be up for a cabinet post to make sure that they weren't hiding some skeletons in their closet. Okay, make sure they were being very truthful. The second one was that she interviewed all of the prisoners of war over the years to make sure they're telling the truth when we're trying to get information from them. I cannot tell you how good, if anybody's good at this, it's been through any of the seminars I are, that can tell when you're not telling the truth. So the moral of the story, again, tell the truth when you're out there. And that's the last of my interview basics that I got, Michael.
Yeah, also Kevin, I've always been taught this, and before I went in for an interview, always rehearsed it, looked in a mirror, had many people interview me, and also had it recorded, because you don't realize kind of the mannerisms that you give off, because those are natural to you, right? So seeing it on camera or rehearsing in a mirror obviously makes it a little bit easier for you to sit in front of the people interviewing. Now, it's not the easiest thing in the world when you're sitting in front of 8 board members or what have it, answering these questions. But just like anything, prepare, rehearse. You can never over prepare. Never over prepare for an interview. So, Mike Arms, do you have anything you want to throw in here?
Yeah, Kevin, what over the years I know you've interviewed PGA professionals for jobs and that. What are some of the horror stories of answers or something like that would tell us to avoid?
Well, I think one of the real keys might be the fact that you try to make an answer up that you don't know the answer to. And all you do is make it worse. So you got to be honest if you don't know, the answer. I think that's really, really a common one. The second real nightmare I run into, and again, my job at Wilson was to interview them to be sales reps. So what am I looking for at the end? I'm looking for the best closing, because salespeople need to close the deal. And so if you're terrible, if you don't have a closing and you just say that's it, and you don't tell me why I need to hire you, that's a big mistake right there. And in talking about, the whole interview process, it brings me to, a really important point. I think the most important thing that you can do when you're going to interview for a position is to do all of your investigation work, all your homework. I mean, as much as possible, for a number of reasons. To begin with, the people like that all about the club, the course. Look into the history of the place. Know who owns it. Is it member owned? Is it owned by the city, the county? Who's on the board? find out who's on the board, find out who's the big shooters at the place, at the course, or at the club. Who's very important out there, and is there any big tournaments that they have, any large events, how they doing financially. You got to do your homework, and if there's one thing that I teach you today, that's going to be it. Because when he asked about the problems that people have and mistakes people have made interviewing, okay, if they've done their homework, I'm telling you, they're going to do a pretty good job. And why do I want you to go through and talk to as many people as possible? Because every answer that you're going to be giving in that interview, almost all your answers and your closings, all going to be based on the fact of the homework you've done. Okay. And I'll give you a couple of examples. And I want to add one thing to that, and that is get as many people's opinions and not just one. For example, if you had a board member and you ask him a little bit before your interview, what he thought of the junior program, and his son or daughter can't tie their own shoes and they're 12 years old because of their lack of athletic ability. He might answer, or she might answer that the junior program's awful. My child has not got it airborne in 2 years. Very common. Well, if you ask 9 or 10 others, they might say, this junior program is about as good as it gets. Okay. So as you start to gear your answers, as you start to decide what you want to say, you've just learned that the program and the junior program is pretty good. Okay. So you don't want to bash it. You don't want to, talk bad about the program, because it sounds like most people like it. Okay. So you're going to design your answers based on what you learn out there. I can't tell you enough. Okay. The rule is you never, ever bash or say bad things about the person you're replacing. Okay. Very important. But you really want to make sure your answers are geared to what these people want to hear. If they think the last professional did a poor job on tournaments, okay, and they were run poorly, they were the same ones every time, nobody participated, whatever, okay, obviously you don't want to say when tournaments come up that, you understand such and such was lousy at running them, because there's probably a board member on there that still might be a friend of that last pro. And so never, beat them up. But what do you say instead? You say, I understand the importance to this club or course of having very, very good, well-run, organized tournaments. They bring financial revenue to the club or course. They do this, they do that. They help people join, want to become members, whatever. Okay, all the positive things that make that program, make them understand that how to run and organize tournaments correctly, okay, without ever bashing anyone. So very important. But I think, again, Melvin, back to your question, I see too many of them not have a closing at the end. And that closing, again, team, is really based on your homework, on what you did, the investigation I just talked about a minute ago. You want to tell them in that closing why you're the best person for that position, okay, without a doubt, okay, and that is going to be based on what you learned and all that investigative work you've done on finding out what they like and dislike about everything there at the club or course. So basically, very important.
I agree, Kevin. I think that by researching and doing your due diligence, that's telling the club that you really do want to be there because you took the time to do this on your own. I know when I applied for sales with Bridgestone, I knew the whole company history and the products, and I mentioned that in the interview whenever I would answer a question, so that he knew that I was interested and I took the time to find out. And I guess in another sense, by doing your due diligence, it may tell you really don't want the job too.
Correct.
So that's the importance as well.
So in on that same note, I can't tell you how important it is to talk to as many people again as you can and not just get one or two people's opinion, because it might not be the correct opinion and when you go to do that closing, okay, if some of those very important subjects have not come up, you've got to throw it into that closing. Okay. If you find out that they feel the women have been ignored in the ladies group at the club or the course, and that's important, you got to throw in there in your closing somehow, since it was never brought up, the importance of taking care of everyone at that place and not just certain groups. So that's why this homework that is really, really important for you to determine, what direction you want to answer everything.
And don't you think too, Kevin, that it's very important that you ask questions as well? Because, to me, I'm interviewing you as you're interviewing me, because I want to know if I really do want to work there.
Without a doubt, there are certain questions that are important for you to ask. There are certain subjects that I'd prefer you not to ask about. Some of the ones that I've listed that you can ask about are benefits. I think it's important for you to know about the benefit side of it. When they're thinking of making a decision, when they're thinking of having a new professional start. To me, very important, does the professional position have a job description? You really need to know what's expected of you. One of the biggest problems you face in not always doing a good job when it comes to evaluations is the fact that if you don't have a job description, you don't know what they expect. Okay, so you might want to ask about that. Certainly, length of contract is important. Something to think about. But the one I want you to avoid, if at all, is avoid answering questions or asking about the compensation side, and I'll tell you why. It's really a much better situation for you to discuss compensation if you've been offered the position, and then all of a sudden you're in the driver's seat. Okay. So what my classes that I've gone to have trained me to do is pretty much when asked, and this is a common question, does the compensation package look like it's appropriate? Will it work for you? You don't want to get in that discussion. You just might want to say, what you're offering is what I expected, and I don't necessarily see that there's any deal breakers in it. Leaving the door open for discussion later. Don't get into, if at all possible in the interview, saying this is really not what I expected. That's for later. And that's something that is important to those interviewing you, that you want the job, not just for what it's going to pay. Okay. You want the job because this is really where you want to go and what you want to do. So avoid that compensation if at all possible, and just tell them it's very similar to what you expected, and you don't see anything that could be a deal breaker in it, and leave it for later.
Kevin, that's a good point. In some of my experiences, they've asked me in an interview what I thought of the compensation, and I responded, comfortable talking about this time. We can review it at a later time. So that leads into another interview if they're interested in you, right? So that's the closing part of it. And Mike brought up a good point, and in some of the experiences I've seen in interviewing is you want to carry on a conversation, right? So it is an interview, but it's a conversation. So to ask the questions, ask about their ladies program, ask about their junior program. They're going to tell you what they think. And then to your point, Kevin, about the closing, you can throw that in there, what value you can bring to it. The other thing, I've always looked for and always have been taught to look for personality. I could teach you the rest, but I'm looking for personality, because at the end of the day, we're in customer service, right? So you have to have a great personality to be able to fit, to be with the members, the general public or your team. So personality is really key, and carrying on a conversation, shows that personality too.
And I think, Michael, that has a lot to do with what you brought up earlier on rehearsing, so you're comfortable, okay? And start by rehearsing the questions you think they're going to ask, okay? Very important. And what questions do you think they're going to ask? That's based on all that homework you've been doing about the place, okay? And that gives you a feel what they're going to come after you about, and that tells you what to rehearse or practice on. Again, prepare and work on your closing, rehearse it. Like Michael said, some of these new opening interviews, especially with the virus, are Zoom. Okay. If you've not done a Zoom interview, you might want to, rehearse and practice. I understand that current Zoom interviews, have a way for you to set up and rehearse ahead of time. Not all of them do, but some of them do. So, check and see, and so that you can go on and get used to that type of a Zoom interview, because it's really different. So something to practice. And like Michael said, I've been asked 3 or 4 times by head professionals to sit with and interview associates. 4 or 5 of us will be in there, and we'll actually do a mock interview with associates, and it's filmed, it's videoed, okay, for that associate to review afterwards. Feel free to go there. I think that's probably as good of a practice or rehearsal experience you can have.
No, absolutely. And you brought up a really good point with obviously the pandemic we're in, and doing interviews over Zoom or Google Meets. Think about the lighting, think about your staging, think about how you're setting this up, what they're seeing, what they're looking at when they see you.
Because mine's not.
Rehearse, right? Be prepared. But often this is the first time they're going to see you, and so you want that first impression to be, wow, okay, this is pretty good. This candidate's really strong. So little things make a big difference. I can't stress that enough. Mike, anything you want to add, or any other questions? And certainly want to turn this over to everybody on the call too. I mean, to have Kevin here and ask any questions, please jump in at any time.
I'd like to throw one other thing in there, Michael, and that might be on the written material that you might want to leave after the interview. And again, I keep going back to this, but the written material you want to leave them is going to be based on all that homework and due diligence that you've done about the place. Okay. If, they have a problem and they feel that the operations of the last professional, he or she didn't do a very good job, you don't want to leave them a manual about how to pick the range. Okay. You want to leave them material based on all that homework you've done, based on what they want to hear. Okay. And that stuff that you can leave them, there's some very common things. The 90-day plan, what your plan is to do in your first 30, 60, and 90 days. Okay, that could be, anywhere from, securing financing for your shop, or if the carts are yours, or, remodeling, or finding a place to live, or finding out what needs to be changed and what the true direction of the board is. But a 30, 60, 90-day plan is very common. A policy and procedures manual, on golf operations. Awfully nice to leave them when you've interviewed. Maybe a junior golf outline of your junior golf program. Maybe your tournament operations manual. Maybe, merchandise. Maybe they own the shop, so they want a merchandise buying plan. Okay. But again, leave the materials that are based on what they want to hear. Leave after all the homework that you've done, so that you're giving them what they want to see and what they want to hear. Very important.
Kevin, I have a question for you.
Go ahead, Jacob.
I'm joining the party a little bit late, and I'll probably be able to look through the recordings. But forgive me if I'm asking a duplicate question. When you're interviewing, say, even for another assistant job, and you have a head professional interviewing you, is there? We'll take this even specifically to like a private club, because if you're at a resort or a public golf course, you really only have 2 or 3 people above you, whereas at a country club you could have 300 people above you, right? You have your members that have input. What would you suggest for an applicant, if they were able to meet some members, or say if they were offered the job, say you did really well in your interview? This is kind of looking a little bit further ahead. What would you advise? Would you try to pick out a few prominent members, or ask for members, and just kind of assume that if the head professional introduces you to someone, that they're a prominent member? Because you want to make them happy too, right?
There's no doubt. I think, as I mentioned earlier on, in all of this homework that I'm suggesting that you do, you find out who some of the more powerful members are at a private, who the board members are.
Yeah.
I also think you try to find out, if possible, if it's another assistant's position, if there's something they didn't like about the last assistant, or performance-wise. Maybe that person was late a lot. Maybe they didn't seem to say a lot. They were too quiet. All those things, again, are going to allow you to go into that interview. And if you know the past professional, maybe you're talking to some of the other professionals' friends, and you find out that he felt that there wasn't a desire to continue in the PGA program. So it was more like, instead of an assistant or associate, it was more like having a counter help. And that then allows you to design your answers to those questions based on what you found out. Very important.
I like that.
Great question. Kevin, also, let's talk a little bit about portfolio. When you go into that interview, the right time to present your portfolio, how do you do it, and what should be in that portfolio? So any advice on that?
Again, I had mentioned a couple of things that you can have in there, whether it's a tournament program, your tournament program, your junior program, your resume. I'm assuming they will have. I've seen people leave me summaries about their job experience. And in that summary, they've touched a little bit about why they feel they'd be, the best person for this position. Again, if they've just stating some common things that they saw on the job bulletin, it doesn't mean a hell of a lot to me. But if they've gone their homework and they know that, why I'm replacing a certain sales rep at Wilson, and why that person, what that person didn't do to satisfy me, your summary might all be based on those that information you found, and then suddenly you've caught my eye. So as for leaving portfolios and manuals, again, you got to use I think it's more of your gut feeling on whether this would fit into what they're looking for or not. And I don't know, Mike, did you leave summaries on why you were the best candidate after interviewing?
I always had a portfolio. It just showed who I was, what I've done, where I've been. Just so obviously you talk about an interview, but it's also nice for them to see it in writing or a picture or something like that. So it always helps me. It's always an update.
Fact, Michael, it's a known fact that you, if you can implement a picture on that material you're leaving, that people don't like to throw materials out with pictures on them. And so whether it's your resume, possibly your portfolio that you're leaving, I would try to get your picture implemented on there, just because it's a known fact they don't like to toss them.
Yeah. Also, and Jason brought this up, and I guess I really hadn't thought much about it when he was talking in our fall meeting, is, we're all on social media. We all have Facebook or Instagram. Be careful what you put out there, because they will look. That's probably one of the first things when they see resumes and candidates come in. They're going to do background on you too, like you're going to be doing on them. So just be mindful of what you put out there and advertise, because that social media world is crazy.
Very good. Yeah, very good. I'd be very careful there. And then the last point, before we have any additional questions that I wanted to bring up, is that it's not uncommon when I had interviewed people, and they unfortunately didn't get the position, for them to call me on the phone and say, Kevin, what do I got to do different? What'd you think I did right, and what did you feel I needed to improve on? If you're comfortable with that person, that call could help you a great deal. It might teach you what you got to work on. Maybe there's nothing that you got to work on, because the person that got hired is the president's brother's kid. He had no chance. But a lot of times, I would be very honest when they call me on the phone, and I'd say, one of the things I felt, is that you didn't listen well enough when I was asking the questions, and you weren't, thus your answers weren't as specific to the question as I'd like to see them. Something like that. Feel free to call them if you're comfortable with it.
One thing that we were coming from a different standpoint when I was a police officer, and they were talking about testifying in court, was that whenever you're asked a question, you should take a second to think about the question instead of immediately answering, because you really don't want to blurt or assume what the question was before it's finished.
Yeah, good point. Very good.
I have a follow-up question for you, Kevin. When you're prospecting all this information, like if they don't like pictures or not, or what the last person did wrong to get them fired, or why they left, or why members were upset, or why, whatever. Can you, what's the best way when you don't have too many resources? Is it okay to call the head professional or whoever posted the job and say, hey, I feel like I've done some homework, but there's still some loose ends. Could you tell me, basically ask them for advice or help? Or is that kind of looked on as maybe you're not in the right place?
I think if you can tie it, Jacob, into a couple of other things, questions that you may have about the job that were not on the bulletin. Okay. So it doesn't look like that's all you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And you work your way into, picking their brain a little bit. I think it's wonderful. But I think, again, you don't know if this person that you got on the phone happens to be a very good friend of the person, for example, the pro that maybe got let go.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's where trying to figure that out ahead of time is important. Okay. And I know if you'll be amazed how many people know people at where you're trying to talk to.
Right.
But you've got to know that ahead of time, if you're asking, what the professional that got let go has done wrong, you better know whether the person you're asking is a very good friend of that person, of the pro, or not. Very important.
Okay. Perfect.
Another great question. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Others?
Hey, this is Davis. I just wanted to chime in onto that, what you guys just said. I obviously, I don't have a ton of experience with interviewing and stuff, but I've watched some turnovers over the last year or two at my club with a head pro, and I just want to say that obviously the person we hired was pretty careful about all that stuff because our past head pro was really good friends with just about every board member, and especially the guys in the interview. So I just think if those people were probably pretty cautious and aware of any bad talking towards that past head pro. That's all I had to add. Thanks.
Absolutely agree. And again, like I mentioned, no bad talking, whether they're friends of them or not. Just talk on the positive side of the areas that you found out that the professional didn't do a very good job in. If their junior program was poor, and many people pointed that out, you certainly don't want to say his or her junior program is poor, but you do want to talk about how strong and good of a junior program you can have and you would provide.
Absolutely. Good point, Davis. Thanks for bringing that up. Any other questions we have for Kevin?
Yeah, I had another question.
I'm ready.
But go ahead if somebody else has one.
All yours, buddy.
Go ahead, Ben.
How you doing?
Good.
Kind of shift gears here. Do you miss working at a golf course or green grass facility? And the second part is, do you feel like it's difficult for someone to veer out of that? Say for example, the Titleist rep position opens, right? If you're, we all obviously all have sales experience, but if you're going to do that full time, let's say, you feel like it's difficult for guys in the business to do that, or
I would say that it's based on companies. So you take a Titleist and they have a feeder program, and that feeder program really takes people from their customer service inside sales reps positions and move them out into the field. Okay. Then there are other companies that don't have feeder programs. So it's based on who, which company you're dealing with. Two, I think, do I miss the green grass? I certainly do. And there are positives and negatives to both positions. Green grass wise, being as a pro or a director of golf, you didn't see many weekends. You were working most holidays. When you became a sales rep, there's nobody usually babysitting you. It's your job to get up and go. Besides demo days, you're not doing many weekends. You're certainly not working hardly any holidays ever. So different. Now, they both have a lot of hours. Don't get me wrong. Whether you're in sales to do it correctly or whether you're a head pro or whatever, they take a lot of hours, okay? But the hours as a sales rep is a lot different than the hours. Let's say you're both working 55 hours. When you're working it at your house and you can get up and go do whatever you want, you want to take an hour to go to a child's baseball game or whatever, 55 hours seems like 40 hours, okay? Big difference because you can leave, you can base your schedule on when you want to work. You want to take Friday afternoon and not work, okay? Well, you probably better work Saturday or Sunday a little bit. Still 55 hours, but it doesn't seem quite as many hours just because of the freedom. And I know, that there's a big difference there. And I would miss the head pro director of golf type positions that I was in had I not been able to stay in the industry. I've always been able to stay in the industry, which is quite a bit different than becoming, a medical sales rep, for example.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
And then just one last question for you. So So I guess just feeding off of that a little bit, that thought, and I understand that it's all based off companies. Every company is different. I guess I'm just trying to get a little insight on, do a lot of companies look for PGA professionals? Even, they are golf specific, obviously, but do they pride themselves in hiring PGA professionals, or do they, I suppose anybody and everybody's welcome to apply.
Well,
Yeah, and I guess so. Just because it's not on the PGA job board doesn't mean that, where else could a person look for sales jobs, besides the PGA website?
You don't traditionally see many of the sales jobs advertised. For example, if I was Human Resources came up with this brilliant idea that they wanted to run I was hiring a rep in Texas, and they wanted to put it in LinkedIn. Okay. I got 400 resumes. Okay. I got plumbers, I got electricians, wonderful people, but I got a lot of resumes from those that didn't have any sales experience at all. So you're not going to see those job listings there very often. As for me, I really tried to interview PGA pros. One of the reasons is sales has a lot to do, in my opinion, with the relationships that you build with the people that you're calling on. Well, if they were a golf professional, even in another area, they've got something very in common with a lot of the people they're calling on, and that gets their foot in the door a lot easier. So I did. I know, I can tell you, I basically tried to interview PGA professionals, other salespeople that could be outside the industry. Okay. Those were two very popular ones for me. Once in a while, you interview a tech rep that was, came across and has had a lot of experience and I know Melvin was a tech rep there for a number of years, and I'm sure that had a lot to do with his opportunities that came forward to him. So I looked at some of those also, but to me, the first thing that you have to do if you're going to go into sales is the regional managers need to know that's what you're after. Okay. You need to, whether it's show up at the PGA show and meet with the regional in your area, ask, give them a resume, whatever. They need to know that you're interested right out of the blocks, because they'd much rather interview interested parties who might fit into this than like I said, maybe a carpenter who does great work but has never sold a thing in his life. So yeah, let them know. You gotta talk to them. And I get a lot of calls, to be honest with you, Ben, on people asking about the sales side of the golf industry, what they can expect. I try to outline, what kind of pay they can expect. I try to outline the differences between an independent sales rep and a company rep. So feel free to always give me a call, but that's kind of, and then I make some suggestions on how they might be able to get into that situation down the road, which is not easy to do.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, I'm actively looking, and I just don't want to limit myself to, I do want to move up. So, I don't want to limit myself to just one position, I guess. There's a lot of, I like to believe that there's a lot of different things you can do in the golf industry versus just being an assistant or head pro or,
even at the manufacturer side of it, like where I worked at Wilson, there were PGA pros in the public relations. There were PGA pros in the marketing side of it. There were PGA pros that were what we call product specialists, in charge of golf balls or golf bags or whatever. So there's, even on the manufacturer side, there's a lot of options out there. Besides, but I really like what you're bringing up. And in fact, one of the things that I try to share with associates is, if at all possible, try to work at different styles of operations, try to be an associate at a public and then maybe a private, and because until you do those things, you're not really sure, what you might like best, what you're going to shoot for down the road. Melvin was at a public golf course, and then now is at private. And, I think that if you can work at different types and styles of operations, it will really help you decide, what direction you want to go in the future.
Yep, I agree. Thank you.
Ben, I would also say, if you, some of the reps that call on you and get to know them, they will know when these jobs open, believe me.
Amen.
So they would be a good person, just say, hey, if you hear of any openings, let me know. And they can get a hold of you and say, hey, I hear this job's open, or this, if you want to go for it. And as Kevin said, for about 10 years, I was a tech rep. And so you get to know all of the reps that way, and they get to see your work ethic and how you deal with the public, and they would also be able to help you with getting into the sales end of it because of their interaction with you.
Yeah, copy that. Thank you.
And what you're doing right now is sales and public relations and marketing. Right. I mean, that's all part of the hat you wear in the program. I mean, you are doing a great deal more of it than sometimes you guys even recognize. Jazz, you're quiet up there. What's going on?
No, that was Ben. That's great. And Kevin, thanks for the advice. You're spot on it, and Mike too. So, any other questions? I know we just got a couple more minutes. Certainly want to be mindful of everybody's time, especially Kevin's and everybody on the call. So
I had a few quick questions, Kevin, just to wrap it up. The first one was, when you're in an interview, can you ask how many applicants there are, and is that frowned upon?
I don't usually get the question on how many applicants. Okay. I will a lot of times get the question on, are you interviewing a lot of people or is it pretty limited?
Okay.
General question like that.
Okay. And
they may say a lot or limited, or they may go right to the number for you. Okay. But it's, how many, I would say, are you doing a lot of interviews or is it pretty limited? So you get a feel where you stand.
My last question was, I'm not sure if you've already discussed it, but what was the most memorable experience you've had in giving an interview or hosting an interview, I guess, interviewing somebody else that was positive?
Again, when I was doing a lot of my interviewing, it was for sales positions, and so the closing was very important to me. Mm-hmm. And I can remember, very memorably, people looking me right in the eye and saying, you give me this opportunity, I won't let you down. Well, that's that's pretty good. Okay. If you look them right in the eye and you say, you won't regret your decision, that's a good one right there. And that's meant a lot to me. I think I like personality, as Michael mentioned earlier. I like a guy or a gal that's got a little humor in it, and not just complete, stale interview situation. Again, I think the rehearsal side of it will allow you to relax and make the whole experience good for both sides. There's nothing worse than, me interviewing somebody that's, very, very nervous and a wreck and can't, say or do much. So, I think the rehearsal side, as we talked about earlier, is is very important. I have a list of questions that after all the seminars that I had to attend on, I have a list of questions that I ask. And if somebody ends up wanting to see those, you certainly feel free to send me an email. But, one of them on the sales side for me was, how do I know you're competitive? How do I know how competitive you are, which is an important aspect of sales? And I had one guy, he was, I'm guessing 45 and had the same hair that Melvin and I have, which is none. Basically said to me, I'll tell you how, I'm competitive. I'm an ultimate fighter. Okay. I'm a cage fighter. I said, wow. Yeah. I guess you are competitive at age 45. But things like that, that stun you, that surprise you, that, sometimes a little humor that they throw at you, those things are, separate you a little bit, and again, your closing can separate you and anything that we talked about, Jacob, earlier when you might not have been on about, finding out as much as you can about each operation that you're going to interview for, whether it's for another associate's position or whether it's for a head pro's position, knowing all you can. It makes me feel really good when they came in and proved to me how much they knew about when I was the director of golf at the operation I was running there, or when I was at Wilson, and what they knew about that company. So very impressive, and it meant a lot to me. They did a lot of homework, like Michael had said earlier.
Kevin, did you hire the cage fighter?
I did not. I was concerned about my health and well-being. No, I almost. I would put. I would. My system was to try to get down to maybe 12 of phone interviews, which would probably now become Zoom interviews, and then get down to maybe flying in 4 finalists, and he was a finalist. But wow, yeah, ultimate fighter.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
The other
everybody-
thing is with any sales, because you're selling yourself, is you have to ask for the sale too. Don't be afraid of saying, I really want this job, and and you have to ask for it.
Yeah, ask for it and tell them they won't regret the decision.
Awesome stuff. Kevin, thank you so much. We
Sure.
really appreciate your time, your words of wisdom, and everybody on this call. Feel free to reach out to Kevin.
Sure.
Kevin is one of our mentors. He's here to help you, just like all of us are. Especially, he offered the interview questions. So certainly take him up on that.
There's some hard ones in there, team. I'll tell you. There's some difficult ones that, I've learned from my being interviewed and also from the seminars that, really might throw you a loop. So you might want to ask me about those, send in those questions.
Absolutely. And that goes back to, like you alluded, right out of the gates, be prepared. Be prepared. So the more questions you can rehearse, know the answers to, once again, the better prepared you're going to be, and that's going to make you stand out. So with that, we will end this.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Yeah, no, everybody, thank you for a great 2020. Wishing all of you Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays,
Yeah.
Be safe, and looking forward to a great 2021. All of you take care. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Kevin.
you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Kevin.
Thanks, guys.
All right, y'all take care.
Hey, Mike.